questions all day long. So at this point, let's move in a little bit of different direction. I'd like you to state how this book is helpful. Does it have exercises? What's the premise of your book?
The premise of the book was to discover if the people who seem to rise above the curve in terms of happiness and success, if they had any commonalities. And what we found studying these Harvard students, studying Olympic athletes, studying people in business who are very successful, what we found is that they seem to be picking up and using the same 7 strategies over and over again. And so what we did in the book is we outlined what those strategies are, and then we tested them to find out, do these work for everyone? Does it create positive change? What's going on inside the brain? So there are 7 strategies or principles I talk about in the book. Each one you can read about the science for it, but then you can attempt to apply it immediately within your own life. One of the ones that we talk about is, and I think that this is at the heart of what we're talking about, is that oftentimes there's so many writers that talk about happiness, or that we know all these good things that we want to be doing in our lives, but we oftentimes don't do them. So what we looked at is what causes some of these positive outliers to actually pick up on these positive habits and create these changes in their lives. I started this because I heard the sleep researcher one time who said that if you sleep 8 to 9 hours a night, you will actually age significantly slower. And I went up to him afterwards, and I was like, that research is amazing, and the data was actually very strong for it. So I jokingly said, well, you must sleep 20 hours a night, given this research about how it makes you so youthful. And he looked at me kind of confused, and he said, Shawn, I'm a sleep researcher. I stay awake all night watching people sleep. And we started joking around it. He mentioned that he only sleeps about 3 hours a night. And he told me how old he was, and he literally looked 10 years older than he was. Wow. He was walking, living proof of his research, but in the opposite direction. And what that helped us to realize is that information alone is not transformation, which is hard as a scientist to know because we've come up with all this great information, and the question is, will people then use it? Which is why I wrote the book in the first place, to give people these strategies that help to make those things easier. One of the principles is something called the 20-second rule, as in seconds and minutes, the 20-second rule. What we found is if you have a positive habit or a negative habit, let's say you wanted to stop a negative habit, we found that if you make it 20 seconds harder to start that task, your brain magnifies how long that actually seems, and you can break that habit actually very easily. The flip is true as well. If you have a positive habit you want to do, we found if you make it 20 seconds easier to start that habit, it becomes significantly easier for your brain to then pick up that. So I'll give you an example. So okay. I was watching too much television. According to Google, the average American watches 5.2 hours of TV a day. I was slacking. I was only getting in about 3 hours, but that was way too much time to, actually be productive and see my friends. But every time I'd come home from work, I'd sit down on the couch, and it was so easy for me to press the on button on the remote control. It's what we call activation energy, and that's the key to the 20-second rule. Activation energy is, in order to create a change in our life, there's an initial investment of energy, which is at the highest point at the beginning of the change. And then once you put in that energy, then the change becomes significantly easier to do. So for me, it was low activation energy to press the on button on the remote control, and then I'd come home from the office, and then I'd watch The Office. So what I did was I just decided to take the batteries out of the remote control and try this research for myself as well. I just took the batteries and walked them 20 seconds away to my bedroom and left them there. The next couple of days, I'd watch myself come home. I'd press the on button on the remote control, forgetting that the batteries weren't there. I'd get frustrated that I did these experiments, but what I realized was my brain would then tilt away from the TV. It was easier for me to pick up a book, or easier for me to journal, or easier for me to call my friends and hang out with my real friends instead of my fake friends on TV. And as a result of that, by adding 20 seconds of activation energy to that task, my brain then made it significantly easier for me to stop doing that habit. So that's an example of stopping a negative habit. The way we create a positive one, which is what most of the book is based upon, how you create positive ones, is in the 20-second rule, we make people make things 20 seconds easier to do. So for for me, there's all this research that describes how if you exercise in the morning, it increases your IQ at work, it creates this cascade of success. Exercise is the equivalent of taking an antidepressant. But all that information is useless unless you actually wake up and exercise. And for about a year and a half, I failed at that, even though I'm a positive psychologist. So one night I just moved my athletic shoes right next to my bed and put a workout routine on the wall. And for 21 days, which is what William James says that's how long it takes to create a life habit, I just went to sleep in my gym clothes for the next morning. And what we found is when I did that, suddenly my brain, when I woke up in the morning, said it was significantly easier to start. And I was able to create a life habit of exercising in the morning. So what we do is we go through people's day about these positive habits they want to make, whether it's sending a kind email to their team, whether it's spending time with their family, maybe it's going to exercise, any of these habits that we are about to make for New Year's resolutions. We just make them 20 seconds easier, and the success rates skyrocket on it. So the other 6 principles in the book follow that pattern. We're looking for what's the research that we found to make positive habits stick, and if we do have them stick, what effect it has upon them.
Wow. Now, as far as that 20-second rule and the 21 days, so that's reprogramming your response to something that you have your sights set on. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, so it doesn't take us, if you put on a seatbelt 21 days in a row, by day 22, your brain doesn't even have to think about it. You naturally do it. It's down into your muscle memory. It takes no energy for you to do. You don't have to actually push yourself to do it. The same way, most people, everyone, when they go into work, they wear clothes. That's not a big hassle for them to decide, well, should I wear clothes today? Now, what clothes they wear, because that changes every day, they have to think about. But the decision to wear clothes, we just naturally do. Most people have a life habit out of brushing our teeth. What we were interested in, William James, who came up with this idea, after whom our psychology building is named at Harvard, he said if you do the same activity 21 days in a row, whatever the activity is, you can create a life habit out of it. So what we've been trying to do is we take these habits that we know have a profound effect upon the brain, and we get people to create life habits. So, for example, I'm working with senior leaders at Adobe right now, and we're having them journal for just 5 minutes a day for 21 days in a row, writing about a positive experience. And at the end of the 21 days, not only have they created a habit of they just, without even thinking about it, they'll write in their journal for 5 minutes a day. But then you have all the effects that come after it. They are 30% more immune to cold viruses. Their job satisfaction increases. We find that they become more charismatic as leaders. They enjoy their work more. So a whole host of benefits, all based around this idea of if you can ingrain a new pattern into your brain, what you're going to be doing is you're changing the way your brain will process reality.
All right, excellent. Shawn Achor here on Common Ground discussing the happiness advantage. We have a few minutes left here. What would you like to interject? I've asked a lot of questions. We have, like I said, a few minutes left. What would you like to put in here that we haven't talked about, perhaps?
I think one of the things that's fascinating is where happiness comes from. I mentioned at the beginning of our time together that when my friends from Texas come to visit me at Harvard, they see all these beautiful buildings and they assume that students at Harvard must be happy with all those opportunities and resources. As I've traveled to all these different countries, I was working in 2008, 2009 with Swiss bankers in the midst of this banking crisis, and many of them were just devastated when they did not receive their bonuses. And working with them, I realized how hard hit many of these Swiss bankers were. I left Zurich to go down to Zimbabwe, and after seeing how much unhappiness and stress there was in Switzerland, I was worried about Zimbabwe. I thought it would be significantly worse. It just got rated by U.S. News and World Report as the worst country in the world to live in terms of its education and its health and happiness, all those different types of things. And I think that those measures I think the health ones and the economic ones are valid, but I think that the happiness ones that they normally do are usually linked to things like, how much money there is or how many people have jobs, all those different types of things. But when